What's going on, everybody? I'm MotoRiot, and today we're going to be doing an engine swap on my 2006 CBR1000RR. Before we get started, a few things. Basically, you're going to want to get your bike up on a rear stand. That's very important because, again, we're going to be dropping the engine out. So you're going to need room to maneuver and get your jack in there, get the motor in, things like that. And you don't want the bike moving around a lot. Also, I'm going to do a lot of stuff off camera just to save time for the video. I'm not going to show you me taking fairings off and doing a lot of the stuff that's tedious. There's videos out there that you can look up on how to remove fairings, how to remove different components of this engine. So I'm not going to be doing a lot of that. I may touch base on it and show you what screws you need to take out maybe, or something of that nature. But really just going to try to focus on the main component, which is the engine, the engine, the radiator, the bolts that hold the engine in, removing the wires from the motor, stuff like that. So what I'm going to do first, I've got the fairings off, I've got it down to the bare bike. I'm going to pull the hose over here to drain the coolant. Now there is a drain bolt somewhere on this bike. Then I'm going to take off, after I do that, I'm going to take off the radiator. There's actually a few bolts here, and then there's one up under there, and there's one on the other side. We're going to pull that off, and then I'm going to take the headers off from that point so that I can drain the oil without getting it all over the headers. Before I actually drain the fluids out, it's easier to remove the exhaust. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two bolts out of this right-hand rear set, and then the clamp is actually, I don't know if you can see that, there's a clamp back in there, and you can take that off, and I'm going to remove from here over to the headers, and we'll discuss that once I get to it. I've got the radiator out. It is over there. Now it's time to take the headers off. Now what I was going to tell you about the headers, and the reason you need to be careful, is there's these retainers, and they're a 10 mil, and you stick it on there. But what you want to do is, more or less, it's only when you're really tightening, but they can be very easily bent. So you just want to be careful in this area. I don't want to have to order another part. But you can, this is where a lot of issues with knocking, or people hear like a ticking noise. It's usually an exhaust leak, and that's the last thing that you want, obviously, when you're trying to make a lot of power, or if you just want it to run efficiently in general. Alright, so I've got the oil drained out, I've got the radiator off, and now we have the headers off. Alright, so once you take the tank off, you're going to see a lot of different connections down in here. Lots of wire connections. You're going to see your air box, and it's a good idea to disconnect the battery before you do this. Otherwise, you can cause a short circuit, and that's never good. So I'm going to get started taking off some of these wires and stuff. I've got these wires here, this wiring harness. There's two plugs that go into the ECU up there, and then there's this third sensor, and I am not sure what this does. I'm assuming it's some kind of air fuel sensor, maybe not air fuel sensor, but something. And then your injectors here. These are your upper injector plugs. There's also, if you see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 screws that hold this on. Don't forget about the one in the center. So now I'm going to work on getting this. You have to also take off this here, which I'm about to do. and then I'm going to work on this this jumbled mess of wires down in here. Okay, so now I've got the top of the airbox off. Now I don't care about this engine. I'm going to be taking it apart and possibly parting it out. But if you are wanting to save the engine for any reason, you definitely want to plug these holes up here into the intake. So now there's a whole host of screws. There are actually only a couple that hold this thing on, and I believe they're around the throttle bodies here. And so it's, you take those off and then you can get to everything up under here. And I've got it down to the throttle bodies now. You can see that was the hole on top, and you can see the crack right there. Okay, so I unplugged this whole harness here, and this, my throttle bodies, was an absolute pain because get that out of the way. Because basically there was all this these vacuum tubes and whatnot, and that is for, I'm assuming, idle, because you can adjust the idle from there. And then there's these little screw clamps, and they were a pain to get to. But yeah, there's lots of wires down in here. I've still got to take the starter off, and I've got to take, actually I think that's about it. But there's just a lot of plugs and stuff that you have to take off. You don't have to take this ground strap off. It's just going into this main harness here. I had to zip tie this up out of the way. And then, don't worry about these plugs. I mean, you can, if you really want to, you can label these, but mine, I know where they go, so it's not an issue. So also, I've got these block-off plates here that I'm going to have to remove and put on the new engine. I'm going to need to undo the coil packs as well, which it looks like they route all the way over to that side, so that's good. And then just a few more little things like disconnecting the clutch. I've got to, you want to get that out of the way. And then I don't think this comes with a new clutch. Yeah, because it's it's right there. So literally that whole cover is going to go there. So this whole cover right here I'm going to have to reuse, which is good. So actually I may not have had to pull that off, but I'm going to have to take off that. It's going to come with it. Chain as well, that sprocket's going to have to come off, and then I'm going to have to pull the chain back that way. May have to release tension there. So I've got the starter out, as you can see. There's 2 bolts here that you have to take out. There's a little bracket, and you have to, it's basically held in with a seal. There's a seal in here. There's nothing that really holds it other than that. And as you can see, here's that bracket with the 2 bolts, and then you just pop it out, put it on the new one. Alright, so where we're at now is I've started taking out these bolts for the engine. They were fairly simple. Now I was confused back here, but there's actually, so I was telling you this, that's for the swing arm. You don't want to mess with that. There's one up here, and there's one down there. Now, as you can see, I can push those through to the other side. So that means that I don't need to mess with the castle nut. So hopefully not. So basically I should be able, oh, you know what, I am going to have to mess with the castle nut because I was right. If you look down in here, there is you twist this and it releases. So you got to twist the castle nut and it releases. So I am going to have to do that, which is okay. But I'm gonna have to figure out a way to get that turned and get it to undo itself. We come to a point where I had to make a special tool, and basically I had to take a 17mm socket and kind of cut it up. But once you pull these rods out of here, you have to loosen them from the other side, right? You pull them out of here, and then you have to loosen this castle nut, and then you put the rod back in, and you can turn this whole mechanism. And I know you guys ain't gonna be able to see, but there is, like I was saying earlier, there's a spacer, and this thing gets tensioned in between here, so it compresses into the engine, and it creates force that holds on to it. So I'm going to release the bottom one, and we've also got bolts holding it in the front, and then it should be able to drop out of the frame. Alright, so we got the engine out, obviously, sitting over there. We had to basically, I had to have some help. We had to lift the front of the bike up to get the engine out that way. I imagine putting it in is not going to be fun either, so I'll update you when we get to that point. Alright, so we got the engine in. It was a pain in the ass, but we got it. I only managed to break one sensor, so that's fine. And I'm going to start hooking everything back up, and I'll give you guys an update. Okay, so what I had to end up doing is I had to take a heat gun and just kind of lightly, with this out, I had to lightly heat these rubber seals up to get it in. Even silicone wouldn't get it in. So, you know, if you don't have a heat gun, you can use a silicone and you can try to stretch it. You know, you can just apply a lot of pressure, but that's, I guess, the best way is just to use a heat gun on it and get it properly seated. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tighten up all of these. You don't want to over tighten them. You'll know when they get tight because it'll be kind of difficult to turn them. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Got it put in. Got all these tightened down. I got these hoses put on. Don't tighten them down too much because you will break through them. So now there's these little ports. They're all along here, and there's 4 of them. Went ahead and put the fuel rail on. You just got these 3 bolts here, and you've got, this is that little vacuum system I was talking about. Alright, so here's what I've done so far. I had to do a little bit of work off camera because I was having to fiddle with some wires, but basically, let me come over here. So this is, to be honest with you, I don't know what this is, but these two, there's a plug here that is a big 2-prong. I think that's a 3-prong plug, and it's going down here. I'm assuming, actually, I know what this is. This is a rectifier regulator, and then it's got this other plug which is down in here. I shoved it down in here just because, but there's another plug in there that's a 2-prong plug. That's all you need to know. It's not super important. It's just 2 fat plugs and plugging those in. And then I also, let's come over here. I also hooked up the starter, and it's got these 2 wires that go. And I got this shaped piece in here. There's a little prong in here, and then it clips down right there. So that's where that is. Now, very important. I'm going to mess with it here in a minute, but I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but there's a little sensor right there, and it's got this, it's part of this assembly, right? So there's that little plug, and that pops onto the end of that. And mine broke the hell off, but that is your neutral. That's your neutral switch from what I understand. So what I'm gonna have to do is crimp that down and get it to stick on there better. Otherwise I won't know when I'm in neutral. Alright, so I got all my injectors plugged in. You can kind of see each one there plugged in. Now I have a power commander, and I'm pretty sure this wire right here, yeah, so this goes up and this plugs into all of that. These wires I think go to an aftermarket module, like a quick shift module. So I've got these 3 wires left, and I'm gonna see, I've got some wires over here, as you can see, so I got to kind of figure out where all this goes. I know some, actually I think these go into the bottom of the tank, if I'm not mistaken, and then this one, this is the speed sensor. I got to figure out where it plugged into, but yeah, so actually, let's see, yeah, so right, so that little sensor that I just plugged in, that is going down, and that is the like I said, if you can see down like right in there, and it came off, and I figured it would, but that little guy right in there, can't really see it, but it's there. And then that comes down, and there's a wire right here. There's a wire, and I believe that's an oil switch, and it just tells the bike if you're too low on oil. Alright, so I put the airbox back on. Again, nothing too crazy that you guys can't handle. Basically all it is, you know, you saw me putting on the velocity stacks and the filter, air filter. You screw that down into the throttle bodies. This wiring piece comes up around here, just kind of fits there. And you have, again, the ECU plugs, this little plug, and your injectors. So now, basically everything is in place. Now I just have to get the fuel line put back. I got to get the tank put back in. Got to run a few more wires. It's just a power accessory going to the back. And just check over, make sure I don't have anything loose, and we will continue from there. Alright guys, so it's another day. It's been quite a while since I've touched this bike. What I've done so far is because I was on a time constraint, I had to finish the bike with all the wiring and whatnot, and making sure that it would start and run, and it does, and it goes through a heat cycle, fan kicks on, everything works. So I'm going to kind of recap the things that you need to do this swap properly. Again, it's very simple. It's basically plug and play, but you know, in case you missed anything previously in the video, it's just kind of an overview. The main things that you have to worry about is these bolts. You have to, again, make sure that those castle nuts, those are crucial, and they're probably the most difficult thing to do with this whole swap, this whole deal. You need one of these. This is one that I made. I took a 17mm socket and I cut it, and you can see one of the teeth is, I ground it off because it was too thin. But basically the teeth, it's rough, and they make tools for this, but as you can see, if I can get in here close enough, as you can see, that fits on there, and it was enough for me to get that loose. So there's that. A couple other things. Just be mindful of the headers. Again, those aren't a big deal taking them off. It's when you put them back on, because what happens is when you go to push them up against the motor, those retainers don't want to seat all the way on. So what you have to do is you almost have to put those retainers on. You have to get the headers up there. You have to get this bolt underneath. There's a bolt up under here that you have to get to. It should be right there. So you have to get to that bolt. Once you get that in, again, you've got that exhaust clamp back here. But once you get that in, the retainers will slide back up, and you can start threading those on. And the key is you want to get those as far tight as possible with your fingers. You don't want to immediately put a wrench on it. You want to get them as tight as you can with your fingers. And what you'll notice is when you put them on, you get all the retainers on, you can push each one. I started from this side, and I pushed it, and I kept twisting those and tightening them until I got it as far up in there as I could go with my fingers. And I did that to all four. And then once you do that, you can take a 10mm and tighten it down. I do it just, by feel. I don't remember the exact torque specs. I'm sure they're somewhere on the internet, but I just did it by hand, and I got it as tight as I felt it was needed. Not super crazy tight, but tight enough that it's not going to back itself off. Also, if you want, you can put, I suggest putting maybe some blue Loctite on there, or some kind of, definitely don't use red, but I think it's like blue or yellow or something that you can use on it. But again, you can look that up and see what exactly is supposed to go on there. So moving on, again, the radiator, not too big of a deal. All the wires, I pretty much showed you all the wires that you needed. Again, it's plug and play, so it's not like there's going to be wires that you don't know where they go. One thing I actually missed, and I had to come back to, is if you will see right here, there is see those two plugs? So that is where your throttle position sensor is. And there were two plugs coming from my power commander, and I couldn't figure out what they went to. Well, it plugs in line. One plug goes to your the throttle position sensor, the other one goes to the other side of it goes to the harness coming from the bike going to the TPS. The neutral safety switch, which again I showed, but it's back in there. If you look, you'll see it. Mine, I've actually got to epoxy it on there or tighten it. It's a little clip, and you can pop it on. Little sensor. I've got to figure out a way to keep tighten mine and pop it on where it won't pop off. But I mentioned that, and basically that's it, guys. I mean, it's not it's not hard. Like I said, it took me, if I would have had a whole day to dedicate to it, then I could have got it done. What we'll do now, you can hear my fuel pump prime. Turn that off before the fire alarm goes off. But yeah, it runs, and like I said, I was heat cycling it before I made this video, right before I started recording this, just so that I can get all of the air bubbles out of the coolant system. Put engine ice in it, and I put the good stuff, Motul 5100 10W40. Got that K&N filter on there, K&N 204, and we got the engine ice in, proper oil level. Everything's running good. No ticks, no weird shit with the motor. So basically now, the engine swap's done. It runs. The swap is done. Now all that's left is to throw the fairings back on and take it for a ride. And again, like I was saying earlier, I'm not going to show you how to put the fairings back on. I'm going to have to mess with them a little bit. They're not perfect, and I've got to get new fasteners and stuff like that. So anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.